In this video, I'm going to be replacing the transmission and diff bearings in this Team Associated B4.1 World's Edition with Boca bearing orange seal ceramic bearings. So I've already removed the motor. It does make it a little bit easier to do this process. You don't have to. You can just leave the wires attached and pull it to the side. But it will be a lot easier if you just remove the motor completely. So we'll go ahead, take the body off, take the wing off, just place those to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and take the shims off just so we don't lose those. So there are not that many screws holding the transmission in. First screws we're going to have to remove are the two holding the wing mounts that are in the shock tower. There's two coming down from the top into the transmission, and then there's two more on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and pull those out. Go ahead and take the two out of the shock tower. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the upper two screws here. And the screws in the bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull these wires through the shock tower and get those out of our way. At this point, your transmission is free. The motor guard is underneath the plate, so just make sure when you pull the transmission that you make sure you just get that back far enough to get it up all the way. And your transmission is going to pull straight up. So just put a little pressure on it and it should just pop straight up for you. And your transmission is free. Now in the World's Edition there is a ballast weight, and just keep an eye on that. We're just going to leave it in there, and we'll put the car to the side here. Now your transmission is free. I'm not going to be showing you how to rebuild the diff. I will put a link in the description with a great video on building a diff and a description with how to actually break it in and how to set your diff, and those will be in the description below. So we're going to go ahead and we'll pull the slipper assembly off. It's just a 1/4 inch lock nut. Take that off. Spring, slipper, discs, just pull everything off. We're going to go ahead and just take the motor guard off. There's two screws in the top. We'll just pull those out. Motor guard is free, and there are 5 screws holding the transmission case together, but only 4 are actually holding this motor plate on. So we're going to go ahead and pull the 4 bolts out, and you will see 3 of them do have washers on them, and then the one going through the actual wing mount, it doesn't have a washer. So we're just going to go ahead and pull those out. the 3 screws with washers are all the same length, and the wing mount bolt is just a hair longer than those. And you have to make sure you put those back in the proper place. If you put the longer screw in one of these shorter ones, it will hit the back of the slipper and it will bind it up. Go ahead and pull that off. Remove your motor plate, wing mount. Now there's only 1 screw left holding the case together down here at the bottom. Go ahead and pull that out. Alright, at this point your diff case will come apart. We can go ahead and pull the diff out. We'll pull this upper shaft out. We'll pull the idler gear out. And you can go ahead and just leave that idler shaft in there. Let's see, we'll go ahead and take the bearings out of the idler gear. There's 2 bearings in there. And all we're going to do is just take one of our Allen wrenches and we're just going to press those bearings out. And just slowly work it out. It will be a tight fit, so it will take a little bit of working to get that out. So we're going to go ahead and pull that bearing out. Go ahead, take care of the other side. Go ahead and install our orange seal Boca bearings. Just press those in. We're good. I had already gone through and rebuilt this diff just before this, so when you have this apart, just make sure you clean everything, wipe everything out, get all that, any kind of grit that you see in there out of there while you got the diff apart. So next, we're going to go ahead and press these larger bearings out of the halves. It's a little difficult to get to these. I'm going to actually use a flathead screwdriver, and what I'm going to do is it's just come in here and you could barely get to the inner race through the outside of the case, and I'm just going to start prying the bearing down to pop it out. And it is in there tight, so this may take a little bit of work for you. Alright, got that one out. I'm going to pull this idler shaft out. We'll go ahead and do the other side. And we press the bearing out. We're going to go ahead, put our orange seals in. Just press those straight in. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the bearings out of the top shaft mounts. Now this one that you can actually view from the outside is going to be fairly easy to get out. Just grab your Allen wrench, just go ahead and press it out. And that one should just drop right out. Go ahead, we'll drop a orange seal bearing in there. And I would say it's easier to either take a wrench or something and press it down in there. What I'm going to do is actually use the top shaft and just take the top shaft and use that to press that bearing all the way in. And you can go ahead and leave the top shaft in there. You're done with this half. Now this bearing is going to be a little hard to get to. There's no access from the outside. So what I'm using is my pick tool that I have here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up from the inside of the bearing and I'm going to pry it up and work it around and pry it up from the inside. And just working around, and there you go, it'll pop out. I'm going to go ahead and put our orange seal bearing in there. You know what, we'll go ahead and use our top shaft again to press that in. Alright, so far we got the bearings changed in our case, in the idler gear. I'm going to go ahead and put this shaft back in. I'm going to go ahead and drop my idler gear back in. Just set that to the side. So now there are two bearings inside of the diff for the B4.1. So we're going to go ahead and pull this apart. And like I said, you're going to want to go ahead and rebuild this while you have it apart. I already took care of that. So in this case, I'm just going to swap the bearings. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and take the bolt and loosen it up completely. I'm going to pull the top half off. Just set that to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and leave just retain the actual bolt because it's got your thrust washer and bearings on there, and since I'm not going to be rebuilding it, I'm just going to leave it in there so they stay in place. So we have two bearings in here. We got one that's in the main gear and then one that's right here. And we're going to see if this will fall out. There we go. So that bearing will come right out of that outdrive. It should pretty much just fall out. We're going to go ahead and replace that with our orange seal bearing. Just drop it on there. Just put that in place. And now all the balls stayed in there, but be careful. The balls may fall out of this gear. You just want to make sure you're not on a surface where they're going to go running all over the place. That's why I always got my towel down. But there is a bearing in the center of that gear, and that bearing will just come right out. Just press it out. We're going to go ahead and drop this back on, and it seems our disc stayed with the gear. Let's see here. Make sure that washer there is in place and flat. We're going to go ahead and just put our main gear back on. I'm going to drop in our orange seal bearing here. So now that we got our orange seal bearings in, we can go ahead and put the other half back on. We're going to go ahead and tighten this back up. Your instructions are going to tell you to tighten this up until the spring completely collapses, and do not over tighten it. Just wait until it stops, and then we're just going to go ahead and just loosen it up 1/8 of a turn. You will go through a process with those videos I'm going to put in the description that will show you how to break this in, and it's going to show you how to set the diff. Now, you do set the diff with the car assembled, just so you know. So go ahead, rebuild your diff, and we're going to go ahead and put the transmission back together. I put the head of the bolt on the left side of the car, so I don't have to work around the slipper assembly when I have to adjust the diff. So it's up to you. I think the instructions have you put it on the right side. And just drop that back in. We're just going to push our two halves together here. Everything's moving freely. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put the screw back in that lower spot to hold the two halves together. Just drop that back in. Go ahead and tighten it up. Alright. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the wing mount back on. Now, the wing mounts are actually different. There is a left and there is a right. You'll see that this one basically has an open cavity on each side where the screw goes through. Now, this one has an open cavity on one side, but it's flat on the other. Hopefully you can see that. So the flat side actually goes up against the motor plate. So when we slide this on, we're going to make sure that that flat side's going to go on the right side, and there is an R on the piece if you look close enough. So just go ahead and slide that on. We're going to slide the other one on. We're going to go ahead and put this one together first. Now this one is the longest screw. So we got the longest screw through the upper hole here with our wing mounts on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of medium strength loctite, and I'm going to put a little dab of loctite on this screw before we start putting the motor plate on. Go ahead and do that. Go ahead and tighten that bolt up. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to apply the Loctite to the motor plate side. I feel like if you put it on the bolt and then slide it through, most of that Loctite is going to get pressed off and you're not going to get a whole lot that makes it through to the other side. I have recently had a bolt back out on me, so we're going to try this and hopefully this works a little bit better. We're just going to put a drop in the hole here. Drop in the hole here, and a drop in the hole here. And you'll see, now it's these 3 holes here are the other mounting holes. This external hole here that you see out there at the very edge, that's for your gear cover. We don't need any Loctite in there. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put our last 3 bolts in the transmission here, and go ahead and tighten it up. Alright, now everything's tight. I'm going to go ahead and just use my towel here and just wipe off any excess that's on that front of the plate. And it should be good. Everything's still spinning freely. At this point, we can go ahead and put our motor guard back on. And it's just 2 small button head screws. Just go ahead and we'll slide it through the motor guard first and then we'll line it up with a hole. We'll go ahead and tighten that up all the way. Go ahead and put our second bolt in. Tighten that up all the way. And I guess we'll go ahead and we'll put our slipper assembly back on. You're going to have to put 1 plate onto the top shaft. We're going to go ahead and put a disc into the spur gear, a slipper disc. And I usually keep it orientated with the slipper disc upwards so it doesn't fall out, and then bring the car down to it to make sure it stays in place. Then you can flip it over, put our second disc in, our second slipper plate, and the slipper plates are keyed so they will only fit on 1 way, or 2 ways basically. Go ahead and put our spring and washer, put our lock nut back on. And just go ahead and just tighten that up enough to keep it together. Like I said, those videos will help you set the slipper as well. So, looks like everything's good. Everything's in place and perfect here. So, last step here is going to be going ahead and putting the transmission back into the car. Like I said, World's car has a ballast weight. If you have a ballast weight in your car, just make sure it's still in there, in place. We're going to go ahead and lay that down flat. Now, when you put this in, the only thing you're going to have to make sure to do is put the drive shafts back into the transmission before you put it in place. So we're going to go ahead and slide one side in. We're going to slide the other side in. And just like we did the first time, just got to make sure that motor guard, you have to make sure that motor guard is underneath your chassis. So, drive shaft, and just make sure that motor guard's underneath. You're going to bring it in. Now, it's probably going to pretty much snap in place. There's 2 small posts that the transmission will kind of lock into. That's why you got to press it straight down. So press it forward and press it down. Try to get that back in place here. And I usually hear kind of a pop. I don't know if you heard that or not, but there's a slight popping noise when it goes in. It's in place. It'll be fairly stiff at this point. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put those 2 screws into the transmission to hold it in place. Second screw. We're going to go ahead and do the wing mount. Now the wing mount screws are countersunk just like the lower chassis screws, but they are longer. Let's see if we can get a good picture of that. So between the two, the wing mount screws are longer of the two, just so just so you can keep them straight. Go ahead, put those back in. And the last 2 screws here. And there you go. You've installed ceramic bearings in your transmission now. So next step is go to that link below, pull up that video. It's a great video. I do that for my B4. I do that for my SC10. Great video for breaking in your diff, for setting the diff, and also setting the slipper. So check that link out below and look for videos to replace the bearings in the rest of the car in the future. Alright, bye.